We're still muted? Can anyone hear me? Yeah? Okay. Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for your patience for us getting started. We just want to get everything up and ready. Yeah, for today. So I'm excited to kick off this webinar with all of the baseball data coming out with the All-Star game and everything going on. So I hope there's some baseball fans out there. Should be good times. Yeah, so today I have with me Chad Evans and Allison Bird. I'm Elise Covey. I'm the content manager here at Soft Artisans. And Chad Evans, our senior sales engineer, is the one going to give a demo today and look at all this cool data. Allison Bird is our product owner of OfficeWriter, and she is going to be handling all of the questions that you have today. So we want to, even though it is a demo, we want to make it as interactive as possible. So feel free to use the chat box throughout. Allison will be there handling it, and also want to let you know that we're going to record this and set so we can send it out following the webinar. The demo is based on a blog post that is on our site that Chad so graciously wrote about the All-Star game that happened last week. It was looking at the predictions of it, so yeah, so you should check that out. In the demo today, it's going to be covering stuff within that blog post. We're looking at a few statistics based off of pitchers and hitters to kind of see how the American League and the National League within baseball should match up. So we base that off of the earned run average and the batting average. So we'll look at that. We'll look at how to automate it using SSRS and looking at multi-value parameters with OfficeWriter and using that, as well as a reporting services formula within OfficeWriter. So there should be a lot of interesting, fun stuff. And following that, we'll have a question and answer period with Allison. So for any of your burning questions that you have, she'll be there. And to kind of give you a little context of everything, we have this little infographic of a workflow for building SSRS reports with OfficeWriter, just to give you a little background before we jump into the demo. And I'm going to have Chad go over that with you guys.
Cool. Thank you, Elise. So whenever we're talking about the designing reports with OfficeWriter and SSRS, there's a suggested workflow that we have, and we have a nice infographic today to kind of help describe that process. There's two main phases, the define phase and the design phase. So in the define phase, this is essentially where we're generating the report inside of Visual Studio or Report Builder, whichever your preferred tool is. And you're setting up the connection to your database and defining your data sets using the query interface. And that's the point where you can then take that RDL and distribute it to whoever is going to be designing it inside of the Excel or Word. Today we're going to be looking at the Excel side of the designer. So that's where you can use the rich features of Excel or Word to design your report to have that high fidelity, a nice looking report exactly how your end users want, using all the the color options, charting, pivot tables, etc. So we're going to look at a few of those features specifically today. Okay, let me advance the slides. So we're going to go through a short demo covering some of those topics. Let me switch between programs real fast and maximize my screen. So what we're going to look at, let me start up the Internet Explorer so I can get to my report manager. So when we're looking at the data today, we have a database that we sourced from an online source of statistics for baseball. It has all sorts of interesting information that may be useful if you're into fantasy baseball. So the kind of scenario you're going to be looking at is me as an avid baseball aficionado. I'm trying to figure out a way to statistically predict a winner of an All-Star game. If you're not familiar with baseball's All-Star game, this is essentially the best of the best from the league currently playing. You have your best pitchers, your best batters, etc. So we're going to look at how I can compare the two leagues, the American League and the National League, and see if we can kind of predict a winner using some data and using Excel to do that. So the two things we're going to be looking at today are earned run averages, ERA, which is a fairly common statistic you see around for baseball stats, which is essentially comparing pitchers so you can see how well they do and compare them. And then we're going to look at batting averages for the batters. So I'm going to start up Excel. So as we talked about, the reports are designed from a data perspective to primarily in Visual Studio or Report Builder, and then we can access them to design the Excel version of them through the Office Writer Designer, which is the ribbon add-in that we provide to interface with those reports. Okay, so first thing, we're going to open up our existing RDL. Click on that dialog. I'm going to do a retrieve from the folders or from the SSRS server, and I'm going to look at a starting point that I have to kind of save some of the, it's not too much fun to sit and see me go through design, so I started with a design already. A lot of times we see with our users, they have their desired expectations, so these can be created beforehand or by business users, or the person that wants to receive these reports may have an idea of what they want. So we're going to start with that point and then start merging it with the data that we have from our database and via SSRS. So the first thing I'm going to do is now I have kind of my generic framework that I want to put my data in. I want to start with, the data markers menu item. What this allows us to see inside of our RDL, we have our data sets. So this is the ability to bind from our data that we're getting from a database directly into what specific cells Office Writer needs to put the data. So this allows us to not have to remember any specific syntax for data markers, be able to visually just insert a particular column value. In this case, you can go one by one and insert them. If you have only a couple you're doing out of the mini, you can also do a time saving where you can just select the one column and insert all, and it'll insert the values for us. Kind of saves a little bit of time and having to remember all the details of the data markers. And then what this allows you to do is enhance the data with some additional Excel formulas. For example, today we're going to be calculating ERAs, so I can get the raw data from the database and do an Excel calculation to give me the precision that I need. If you're familiar with ERAs, a lot of calculations and having a lot of digits precision, so you can kind of control that inside of the Excel and not have to rely on some other program for your calculations, because Excel happens to be very good at numbers, so it's a great tool for that. So there's simple calculations for the ERA. The one thing to do a comparison today, I want to talk a moment briefly about this, is we're going to do probably the simplest comparison between two sides. I call it differential. Essentially what it is taking one side and removing the other side. So in this case, the AL will be removed from the NL ERAs so that we can get a value so we can plot them and kind of see which side is being favored over time. This will graph very nicely for us around the zero axis. The other thing we're going to look at today is what's called a win-loss chart. So we can look at how the outcome of the game compares and maps to our ERAs. And then when we look at the batting, we're going to do very similar things. Let me insert some data markers in here. This is very similar. I'm just going to do a quick insert all. And the one thing that's really nice when working with Office Writer, as we insert our values, my formulas will be copied down and adjusted appropriately. I call this the copy down functionality of Office Writer. So because they're associated with those cells, it will, for us, copy them down. So if you have a large table of numbers, all these formulas will be copied down and calculated for us without us having to do anything extra, post-processing or anything like that. Kind of saves us some effort and some time. So now we've got some data in, I want to do a quick view. So the view button, if you haven't used it before, allows us to do a simple view of the data without having to leave the Excel product. So I could go over here to the report in Report Manager and view it that way. To simplify things, and we have the convenience of having the view button. So I'm going to upload this to my SSRS. And I'm going to click OK. I'm going to give it an in-progress name so that if someone was browsing through this particular server, they won't think that it's a completed form yet. So I'm going to click OK. And it's going to publish it. And there we are. And so as part of SSR reports, a lot of the times what we see is they have parameters associated with it. So today we have just one parameter. One of the things that we talked about at the introduction, this is actually a multi-value. So this is new in the last month or so, but there's additional support for multi-value, multi-select values inside of a report. So now I can go through and if I wanted to select single values, I of course can hold down the control key and select any range of values, any numbers of them, and as you'll see, it's highlighting all of those for me, and it'll show me just ones I've selected. And then, of course, you could do a shift hold down and select all of them. All those are functional so that it will be passed over to the report server and processed with your report. So to do just a quick little snapshot, I want to just select a few of these. Let's say those years, just to make sure I'm getting my queries sent over correctly, and I can return values. So this will pull up another window inside of Excel. I'm viewing this exactly how an end user would view this report. And so I can kind of get an idea that my data is coming across correctly, it's being formatted correctly. For example, maybe on some of these I actually want to put in some commas for formatting so I can see them in thousands. The other things we can look at, make sure my formatting is correctly. I want to show them as negative versus positive, depending on who's being favored at that time. And then my outcome. So the report's starting to come together, so we can close that and we're back to our template. Okay. So now we want to, actually one thing I wanted to do before we move on, I wanted to make sure my charts were functioning correctly. So I just quickly did a quick view, and what we'll see is I'm now getting my live data from my tables inside of my charts. One of the things that we're going to focus on for this scenario today is actually looking at some of the charts and making some visual predictions for the data. So one of the things I want to include on my report is the parameters that are being used inside of the report. So before I go and finish up this report, I'd actually want to add a report services formula. So I'm going to bring up the Formula Manager dialog, and I'm going to add a new formula. And there's a number of things that you can do in here. I want to focus today on the parameters. So what I can do is insert the parameters. If I had multiple, these would show up, and I set a list of all the parameters that my report has. And I can now insert that and make this a formula which will allow SSRS to pass it to the report, and Office Writer will insert it wherever we ask it to. So the one thing that, in terms of dealing with these multi-select values, a lot of reports have single parameters, and those will appear nicely inside of Excel. And when you're dealing with a multi-valued, what you're now getting is a list of values. So in order to deal with that, they have a function called join. And what this does is take my list and allow me to specify how I want them separated. Today, maybe I want to use a semicolon, or actually I'm using a comma today. So I typed the wrong thing, but I could easily change that for a semicolon. So this allows me to get one string back from a list of values. And it simplifies the process so I can then stick them into one cell and know exactly how much space to do it. So I'm going to click OK. Now I have a new formula. You know, the name isn't so great, it's kind of generic. So I'm going to call it parameter all star years. And then it renames it for me. And then I could go back and edit it if I want, if I make any kind of typos, or if I want to enhance it and add additional information or change the comma. All those things can be done. Click on close. So now I have that formula available, and I can now insert it into my parameter area. So we'll actually highlight this a little bit more and make it bold and italics. So now I can do another view and save it to the same in progress, and now I can see if all my data is coming back as I would expect. And it's going to warn me that it already exists because I just saved it. And make sure my join is functioning correctly. Let me select a couple unique values, 2005. They're non-continuous, so the analysis wouldn't be so great, but let's kind of illustrate the use of the join function and getting parameters back from SSRS. So my first cut's looking pretty good. I've got my data, it's populating my charts, and now I'm populating my parameters. So one of the things I referenced previously is behind the scenes what you're seeing is a column chart. It's functioning for me today as a win-loss chart. This allows me to visually represent which team, or in this case, league, is winning the game. So this is comparing the All-Star Game's outcome. So what we're seeing is for the red side, the American League, is up on the top half of the graph, and this represents the National League on the bottom half of the graph for the blue side. And we're plotting over on this side the ERA differential. Let me actually make that a little bigger so I can actually see all my charts. And the ERA differential being plotted for those years, and then also the batting average differential. And so now that we have the function of our report, I'm going to go back and review it. As you'll notice that it doesn't prompt me to publish it again because nothing has changed in my document. I'm going to use all my years for my analysis. So kind of looking back on the scenario we're talking about is looking at me as a baseball follower. I'm trying to predict, who's going to win the All-Star Game. So my favorite team happens to be in the National League. I won't mention any names just in case it's not your favorite team. So, for me, I want to see the National League win the All-Star Game because that gives them an advantage at the World Series. They have the home field advantage. So maybe my team won't make it, which I won't mention that they probably won't make the playoffs, but at least I'll know that my league is doing better than the American League. So what we can look at is maybe a visual analysis. We can see the ERA is not highly correlated with the outcome of the All-Star Game, but we're looking at the batting averages, and there is a correlation between, or a visual correlation between the batting averages for the All-Star players and the American League. So maybe a first cut analysis is, if whoever has the better batting average tends to win the All-Star Game. And primarily it's been true that the American League has been better and has also won. There are a few exception years, so exceptions are always what gets you. If you already followed the outcome of the All-Star Game, my prediction on my blog post was not accurate. So let's do something real quick. So I can add, now that, for example, now that me as a business analyst, I can take this outcome, and because all this data is live, what I can do is I hand put together the people that are involved in the players involved in the All-Star Game this year and entered their statistical data into a spreadsheet so that I can now combine these two with a quick copy and paste. So what I can do is take these calculated values that I've taken from my table and do a copy, and I can insert them into, hold on, I always forget, I did them in the reverse order. So I have my batting information for my All-Star. So I'm going to enter 2013. I'm going to do and it stopped my copy. One quick quirk of Excel. So I'm going to make sure I actually copy the values and not the formulas. And the outcome, as I mentioned earlier, happens to be the AL. And I can just copy my formulas down so I can get my calculation. And then I can do my pitching side of things. Pitching, and I can add this very similar calculation. I can do a copy and insert them in for 2013. And I'd always do that in the wrong order. And I can just do a paste values. And once again, I have to now fess up to my loss of my preferred team for the All-Star Game. The NL even had 3 straight years they were winning. So I was like, come on, one more year. That's all you need from me. So, okay, so one of the things is just looking visually at this, the differential for the ERA is looking pretty good for the NL. Looking at this one, it's a very small difference, so it might be more of a wash. What we can do because we have this live data, we can dynamically, as an end user, I can now change the values that my chart is referring to without having to rebuild the entire chart. A fair amount of work went into building this chart because of the two different chart types. A little more than just the straightforward wizard. So if I am able to give this to my end users as the full rich chart, they can do a whole lot more with it. One advantage of using Office Writer is you get that full rich chart in the Excel file and not just a picture. So I can change my references, and now we can start looking at my quick comparison. If I perceive there to be a correlation between ERA and outcome, I could see that there's a fairly large differential between the pitching staff of the NL, represented in the blue side of the graph, versus the AL, represented in the red side of the graph. So what I can, first cut predict, oh, NL has an advantage, so advantage for the pitching to the NL, so they should win on that account. And then looking at the association of batting over time and outcomes, we can now see that for the all-star players exclusively on these charts, that we can see that the batting by the NL this year is actually significantly better up to this point. But despite both of those predictions being in favor of the NL, they still unfortunately lost the game, so they've lost their home field advantage for the World Series. So, oh well, my team probably wasn't going to make the playoffs anyway. So, so there's a couple of things that we can do using the Office Writer product. We can automate the process of generating these files so the end users can get them on demand. We can also, through the use of the Office Writer, have these rich files that they can do these additional what-if scenarios, add on some data that isn't stored in the database, hand-collected data, so you can enhance the data that's stored. And ideally, that kind of data that they're using to do their what-if analysis would get put in the database, so in the future iterations, this file would come out for other users and have all that data available to them. Just kind of quick recap. Today we were looking at the Office Writer Designer. I'm going to close this file. Office Writer Designer, we're looking at formulas and ability to deal with multi-valued parameters. And we were also looking at some of the chart types that we can now expand on and use all those great chart types that Excel provides and mix and match those chart types. And we're also looking at how the Office Writer product allows you to use the Office Writer, the copy down functionality, where your formulas will be associated with your data and automatically updated so that you don't have to tweak them after the fact. With that, I'll turn it back to Elise.
Perfect. Thanks, Chad. Sorry about your team. Sorry for the ale. So as Chad bring back up the slide, we're going to send out on the slide a link to all of this baseball data if you want to use it for your own purposes, and also a link to the blog post that outlines what Chad went over and with the reporting, so you can go back and see it, as well as resources for using Office Writer with SSRS, as you can see up there. At this point, I'm going to just open it up to a question and answer period with Allison. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the chat box. And,
All right, thanks, Elise. All right, so as Elise mentioned, if you have a question, just feel free to type it in the chat box. We'll keep the question and answer session open for the next 5 minutes or so if you have any questions. So while I wait to see if anybody has any questions, I'd like to highlight the multi-parameter select feature that Chad highlighted in the view functionality. That's a new feature as of 8.5.1, which was released last month. So it's available in the 8.5.1 Designer. Probably not this time around, but next time around we'll probably have updates for our upcoming 8.6 release, which you should expect sometime in September, October timeframe. Also, I'd like to take a moment to talk about some of the online support resources that are available for those who are already using Office Writer. So some of you might have been aware, we deprecated our Office Writer Answers site. So now if you have programming questions, about using Office Writer, you can actually ask them right on Stack Overflow. For those who don't know, Stack Overflow is an online community for developers that's monitored by programmers. So you can just feel free to ask your Office Writer programming questions on Stack Overflow. We do have a tag, Office Writer. Similarly, if you have questions about the designer or about designing templates, anything that's not really about using the API, you can ask your questions on superuser.com. It's another site just like Stack Overflow, run by the same organization, Stack Exchange. And the technical services reps are continuously monitoring both of those online communities for your questions. So it's the same great support that we gave you in Office Writer Answers, but now we're just opening it out to the community a little bit. One of the other things I'd like to kind of give a shout out to is we recently added the ability to report bugs and make feature requests on our Office Writer site. That's at officewriter.com/support. Basically, you'll see two new buttons, one to report a bug and one to submit a feature request. These are for general bug submission, feature request submissions. So we can, if you don't have an active support contract, or if you're not currently an evaluator working closely with a pre-sales engineer, you can feel free to submit your bugs and feature requests. There's no guaranteed time frame as to if and when we'll get around to them, but like say you're a Silver support customer, you don't really want to submit one of your 5 incidents, you can feel free to submit your bugs there and we'll address them, but again, there's no guaranteed time frame. So again, that new bug and feature submission is available at www.officewriter.com/support, as well as links and instructions for how to post your questions to Stack Overflow and SuperUser. Okay, so it looks like we don't really have any questions, so I'm going to wrap this up and turn it back over to Elise.
Okay. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, so if you can see on the screen too, if you want to fill out the survey, I'll be sending a link with that in the email too, just so we can get your feedback on topics or data sets you'd like to see covered, just so we can make it more helpful for you and look at more interesting data. So yeah, let us know your thoughts, and we look forward to having you at future webinars. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.